She was a waitress, invisible to the men who owned the city, until she heard a whisper not meant for her. He was Matteo Valenti, a Mafia boss who trusted no one, especially not his right-hand man. She had a choice: stay silent and poor, or risk her life on a single warning. She chose to speak. She told him about the betrayal. She expected a bullet. Instead, the next morning, a velvet box arrived. Inside? Not cash, not a threat, but the keys to a mansion. She thought it was a reward, but she was wrong. It was a cage, and her life would never be the same. The clinking of silverware against porcelain was the soundtrack to Elara Hayes's life. It was a rhythm of quiet servitude, played out in the opulent marble-floored dining room of Galleria Ristorante. Galleria was old-world money, a place where shadowed deals were struck over $500 bottles of Barolo and plates of ossobuco. Elara, with her worn-out black flats and a smile that never quite reached her tired eyes, was just part of the decor. Invisible. Her invisibility was a shield. It let her drift between tables, refilling water glasses and clearing plates, while her mind was miles away, in a cramped apartment, calculating the overdue medical bills for her mother, Sarah. Her mother's multiple sclerosis was a relentless thief, stealing her health, her savings, and Elara's future. So Elara polished glasses, endured the pinches of entitled old men, and prayed for a miracle that wasn't coming. Tonight, the miracle table was hers. Table 12, the curved velvet booth in the deepest alcove, reserved for one man. Matteo the Trident Valenti. Even the air around Valenti seemed pressurized. He wasn't loud or flashy. He was the opposite. He was a void, absorbing all the light in the room. He wore a custom-tailored suit of charcoal wool that probably cost more than Elara made in a year. His dark hair was meticulously styled, and his eyes, when they briefly flicked to her, were a flat, cold grey, like a winter ocean. He didn't just command the room, he owned it. With him tonight was his inner circle, his consigliere and rumoured right hand, Marco the Viper Bianchi. Where Matteo was a block of carved ice, Marco was a slithering, polished charm. He smiled easily, his teeth too white, his eyes constantly moving. He was the one who spoke to the staff, who ordered the wine, who made the hollow jokes. The two men were a perfect, terrifying pair, the shark and his pilot fish. Elara's job was simple: keep their glasses full, their table clear, and her head down. She approached the table, her silver tray balanced perfectly. "More water, Mr. Valenti?" Matteo didn't even look at her. He waved a hand in dismissal. Marco, however, gave her a slick smile. Always Cara, and perhaps another bottle of the Sassicaia. As Elara turned, Marco's phone vibrated on the table. He glanced at the screen, and his easy smile tightened. "Scusate, Matteo. I must take this. A logistics issue." Matteo just nodded, sipping his wine, his gaze fixed on some point beyond the restaurant walls. Marco stood, patting his jacket, and walked not outside, but towards the heavy oak door that led to the private restrooms and a small, rarely used corridor for staff. Elara continued her rounds, her feet aching. She collected empty glasses from table 9, then moved to clear table 10, which was adjacent to the corridor Marco had ducked into. The diners at table 10 had just left. As she stacked the dessert plates, she heard Marco's voice, hushed but vibrating with a tension that was starkly different from his tableside charm. He wasn't speaking Italian. He was speaking rapid, stressed English. "The transfer is set," Marco hissed into the phone. "Pier 12, midnight. Petrov's man will be there." "Yes, Petrov. Dmitri himself is overseeing it." Elara froze. Everyone in the city knew that name. Dmitri Petrov, the head of the Bratva, the Russian outfit. The Valentis and the Petrovs weren't just rivals. They were at war, a cold war fought in shipping containers and back alleys. "He gets the ledgers," Marco continued, his voice dropping even lower. "The entire Project Cerberus manifest. And in return, we get the payment and the hardware." A pause. Elara dared not breathe, pretending to scrub a non-existent wine stain from the tablecloth. "Matteo?" "Don't worry about Matteo. The trident is about to be filed down. He won't see the sunrise. Just make sure the Ophelia file is part of your package. That's my insurance. Yes. Ciao." The call clicked off. Elara's heart was a trapped bird against her ribs. Project Cerberus. Petrov. He won't see the sunrise. This wasn't just stealing. This was a coup, an assassination. Marco was selling his boss out to the Russians to have him killed. Panic seized her. She should run. Forget she heard anything. Go back to her mother's bills and her aching feet. Getting involved was a death sentence. But then, a different, colder thought cut through the fear. Matteo Valenti was a monster. But he was a monster who paid his debts. And he was a monster who was about to be stabbed in the back. What was a warning worth? Could it be worth her mother's life? Could it be worth her life? It was a reckless, insane gamble. Marco exited the corridor, adjusted his silk tie, and flashed his white smile at her. "Still cleaning, Kara. Such dedication." He walked back to table 12. Elara's hands were shaking so violently she almost dropped the plates. She put them down and stood by her service station, her mind racing. She watched the table. They talked for another 10 minutes. Then, Marco stood, clapping Matteo on the shoulder. "Nature calls, my friend. I'll be right back." He headed to the main restroom this time. This was it. Her only chance. She was moving before she could second-guess it. She walked straight to table 12. Matteo Valenti was alone, staring into his wine. "Mr. Valenti," his head lifted slowly. Those grey eyes locked onto her, and the sheer, predatory weight of his focus made her want to vomit. He said nothing. "Mr. Valenti," she repeated, her voice a reedy whisper. I shouldn't. I know this isn't my place." "Then why are you here?" His voice was gravel, barely audible, yet it cut through the restaurant's murmur. I was clearing table 10. Mr. Bianchi, he took a call in the corridor." Matteo's expression didn't change, but a stillness settled over him. The predator had scented blood. He's betraying you," Elara blurted out, the words tumbling over each other. "He's meeting a man from Petrov at Pier 12, midnight. He's giving him ledgers. Project Cerberus. And he said you wouldn't see the sunrise." She watched his face for any reaction. A flicker of surprise, anger, anything. There was nothing. He just stared at her, his face an unreadable mask of granite. He could be ordering her death in his mind. He could be dismissing her as a lunatic. The silence stretched, becoming so heavy she felt like she was drowning in it. Finally, he spoke. 2 words. "Get out." "Mr. Valenti, I said," he repeated, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Get out. Leave the restaurant. Now." Terror, cold and absolute, flooded her system. She hadn't saved herself. She had just signed her own death warrant. She had annoyed the shark. Elara turned and fled. She didn't clock out. She didn't grab her jacket. She pushed through the heavy kitchen doors, past the startled chefs, and burst out the back alley exit, running into the cold night air, certain that a bullet was about to follow her. Elara ran until her lungs burned and her side ached with a crippling stitch. She didn't go home. Going home would be a death sentence for her mother as well as herself. She ducked into the labyrinthine chaos of the subway, taking 3 different trains, her mind a screaming siren of panic. She was a ghost, haunting the late-night transit system, her waitress uniform reeking of fear and truffle oil. She ended up at a nameless, hourly-rate motel near the airport, paying cash for a room with a buzzing neon sign that flickered through the thin curtains. She didn't sleep. She sat on the stiff, questionable bedspread, watching the door, flinching at every car that passed, every footstep in the hall. She had been stupid, a desperate, idiotic fool. She had challenged a Mafia boss and accused his right-hand man. By now, Marco would have returned to the table. Matteo would have tested him, and Marco, the Viper, would have lied convincingly. They would have laughed about the hysterical waitress. And then, to tie up the loose end, they would have put a picture of her on every dashboard of every made man in the city. She was less than dead. The sun rose, painting the smoggy sky a sickly grey. Ilara was numb, her adrenaline gone, replaced by a hollow certainty of her own demise. At 8:03 a.m. there was a knock. It wasn't a polite tap. It was a heavy, definitive thud, thud, thud. Ilara's breath hitched. She backed away from the door, grabbing the flimsy room phone. But who would she call? Hello, 911. I think the Mafia is here to kill me because I snitched on a different mafioso. Miss Hayes, a deep voice called. Not Matteo. Not Marco. We know you are in there. Please open the door. We are not here to harm you. Lies. Of course they were lies. But the door was already splintering at the lock. She had no choice. She opened it. The man standing in the hallway was built like a refrigerator, dressed in a black suit that was clearly custom-made to accommodate his shoulders. He had a scar that cut through his left eyebrow and a completely neutral expression. Miss Hayes, he said, his voice polite. My name is Leo. Please come with me. Where? She whispered, her voice trembling. Leo didn't answer. He simply stepped aside, revealing the parking lot. Parked directly in front of her room, gleaming in the bleak morning light, was a black Mercedes Maybach, its windows tinted to an impenetrable black. This was it. The ride to the river. I can't, she stammered. Mr. Valenti insists, Leo said. It wasn't a request. Numbly, she allowed him to guide her by the elbow. He opened the back door, and she slid onto the plush leather, which felt alien and impossibly soft. The door closed with a heavy, soundproof thunk, sealing her in. Leo got into the driver's seat and said nothing. The car pulled out of the motel lot, merging smoothly into traffic. Ilara watched the city pass by, every street corner a potential execution site. But they didn't go to the industrial district. They didn't go to the river. They drove out of the city, heading up into the winding roads of the hills, where the air was cleaner and the houses were hidden behind towering gates and 20-foot hedges. After a 30-minute drive in absolute silence, the car turned into a long, private driveway. A massive gate of black iron and reinforced steel slid open. They weren't just gates, they were a fortress wall. The car stopped in front of a house that didn't belong in the real world. It wasn't a house, it was a monument of glass, steel, and white stone, cantilevered over the canyon below, with a view of the entire city skyline. It was cold, beautiful, and utterly empty. Leo opened her door. Mr. Valenti has arranged this for you. Arranged what? What is this? Ilara asked, stepping out onto the heated stone driveway. Leo reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, heavy velvet box. Not a gun, not a knife. He handed it to her. Her fingers fumbled with the clasp. She opened it. Inside, nestled on black silk, was a single impos request cut-off. Matteo Valenti did not sleep. After the waitress, Ilara, had fled, he had sat for precisely 4 minutes, his mind a steel trap, analyzing her words. Petrov, Pier 12, Cerberus, won't see the sunrise. The girl was either a brilliant actress sent by his enemies, or she was telling the raw, terrified truth. Her shaking hands and the genuine panic in her eyes suggested the latter. When Marco returned, all smiles and apologies, Matteo had felt a cold, familiar rage settle in his gut. "Logistics," Marco had said, sitting down. "The port is a mess. Forgive me." "Of course, Marco," Matteo had replied, raising his glass. "To logistics. May they always be smooth." Marco had toasted, his eyes as friendly and false as ever. The betrayal was so profound it was almost impressive. This was not a sudden decision. This was a long, festering rot. Marco, his fratello, the man who'd stood by him for 20 years. As soon as they left the restaurant, Matteo made one call, not to his soldiers, not to his captains. He called Leo, his head of security, the only man he trusted with his life. "Get the girl from Galleria," he'd ordered. "The waitress from my table. Find her. Keep her alive. Keep her safe. Put her in the Hillcrest property. Now." His second call was to his port contact. "What's at Pier 12 tonight?" The answer came back 20 minutes later, tense and confused. "It's quiet, boss. Too quiet. But there's a rumor. A private container, flagged to Project Cerberus, is being moved at midnight. Off manifest. We thought it was your private order." Project Cerberus, the code name for his entire supply chain ledger, the keys to his kingdom. Matteo didn't go to Pier 12. A king doesn't walk into his own execution. He sent ghosts, his most elite, unseen team. They arrived at 11:45 p.m. They didn't find Marco. They found Dmitri Petrov's men, heavily armed, waiting alongside a small, terrified accountant from Matteo's own organization. The trap was sprung. The firefight was brief and brutal. The Russians were eliminated. The accountant, when brought before Matteo, sang like a canary. Marco was trading the ledgers for cash and a shipment of military-grade weapons. And yes, the final part of the deal was Matteo's head. The next morning, Matteo stood in his study, a cavernous room of dark wood and glass overlooking the city. He hadn't sent the keys to Ilara as a reward. He'd sent them as a claim. The girl wasn't a guest. She was an asset. And now, she was a target. By warning him, she had inadvertently signed her name on Marco's hit list. Her old life was over, incinerated in the span of a single whispered sentence. He picked up the secure line, the one patched directly to the Hillcrest safe house. "The water is good," Ilara's voice came, small and shaky. "It's from a private well," Matteo said. He watched a hawk circle over the canyon. "You were right, Ilara." The silence on her end was heavy. "So, what happens now?" "What happens," Matteo said, "is you stay. You are safe there. The property is secured by Aegis Solutions, the best private firm in the country. Their men, led by Leo, are on the grounds. Nothing gets in. Nothing gets out. For how long? For as long as Marco Bianchi is breathing." He paused. "You did me a service. I will not see you harmed for it. You will want for nothing. Food, clothes, anything you desire, you tell Leo." "I don't desire anything," she shot back, a flicker of her earlier fire returning. "I want my life back. I want to see my mother." "Your mother," Matteo said, his voice hardening, "is the first place he will look for you. Sarah Hayes, St. Jude's Hospital, room 304. Am I correct?" Ilara gasped. "How? Don't you touch her." "I won't have to," Matteo said patiently. as if explaining to a child. I've already moved her. As of an hour ago, she was transferred to the Kensington private clinic. The finest care, under a new name. She is safer than you are. Her debts are gone. He heard a sharp intake of breath, a muffled sob. You paid it all? I don't like debts, Elara. Not mine, not yours. By helping me, you became my responsibility. By paying your mother's bills, I've simply balanced the ledger. This isn't balancing a ledger, she cried. You've taken us. We're your prisoners. I am a collector of rare things, Elara, Matteo said, his voice a low purr. And you are the rarest thing of all. You're honest. Now rest. We will speak again. He hung up. He turned his attention back to the problem of Marco. The betrayal was clean. Petrov, the ledgers, the assassination. But one detail from the accountant's confession gnawed at him. He wanted the ledgers, the man had stammered, but he was obsessed with something else. He kept asking if we had the Ophelia file. That's all he cared about. The Ophelia file. Matteo's blood ran cold. It wasn't a business file. It wasn't a ledger. There was only one Ophelia, his younger sister. Dead 15 years, a sacred, private grief that no one in his organization, no one except Marco, even knew about. This wasn't a business transaction. This wasn't a coup. This was something else, entirely. Something deeply, unforgivably personal. He realized he needed to see the girl again. Not on the phone. He needed to look in her eyes. She hadn't just overheard a business deal. She had stumbled into the one secret that could destroy him. For 3 days, Elara lived in the sky. The mansion was less a home and more a sterile, futuristic art gallery. The refrigerator was stocked with food she'd only seen in magazines. The closets were filled with clothes in her exact size, from cashmere sweaters to silk pajamas. The bathtub was a carved block of marble. It was horrifying. Leo was her silent shadow. He was polite, paternal even, but his eyes were always scanning. He brought her a new laptop, a new phone, both, she assumed, completely monitored. She called the clinic, and a cheerful nurse confirmed her mother. Mrs. Smith was comfortable and responding well to a new treatment. Elara had wept with a complicated, bitter relief. Her mother was safe, but she was a prisoner of the man who'd paid for it. On the 4th evening, the house, which had been silent, came alive. The lights on the driveway flickered on. The sound of a car engine, a deep-throated growl, echoed up the canyon. Elara stood at the floor-to-ceiling glass window, her heart hammering. The Maybach was back. Matteo Valenti stepped out, and this time he looked different. At the restaurant, he was a king in his court. Here, he looked like a storm contained in a human body. He had shed his suit jacket. His tie was gone, and the top 2 buttons of his white shirt were undone. He looked exhausted, dangerous, and incandescently angry. He entered the house, the heavy glass door sliding shut behind him. He didn't greet her. He just walked to the minimalist bar, poured 3 fingers of whiskey into a crystal glass, and drank it in one motion. "She's comfortable," he said, his back to her. "My mother." "Yes, I know. She's getting the best care in the world, a private suite, neurologists flown in from Switzerland." He poured another drink, this time swirling it. He turned to face her. The cold grey eyes were now burning. "What else did you hear?" he demanded. "What? I told you everything. Pier 12, Petrov, Cerberus." "No," he said, stepping closer. Elara instinctively stepped back, her back hitting the cold glass of the window. "Not that. The other name. The file. What was the name?" I don't..." Elara stammered, trying to replay the memory. "It was a woman's name. Ophelia. He said he wanted the Ophelia file as his insurance. Matteo's face contorted in a mask of such raw, primal rage that Ilara flinched. He slammed the glass down on the marble bar, the crystal shattering, whiskey splashing across the stone. He said that, Matteo hissed, more to himself than to her. That bastardo! He dared! Who is Ophelia? Ilara whispered, terrified. Matteo's gaze snapped to her, his anger so potent it was a physical force. You don't get to ask me questions. You are my guest. You are not my confidant. I'm not your guest, Ilara shot back, her fear momentarily eclipsed by her own anger. I'm your prisoner. You bought me. You paid my mother's debts, and you locked me in a tower like some fairy tale princess. If my life is on the line, I deserve to know why. Who is Ophelia? He stared at her, breathing hard. He was deciding whether to break her or to answer. The silence stretched, the only sound the distant hum of the house's climate control. Ophelia, he finally said, his voice raw, was my sister, my younger sister. He turned away, walking to the window, looking out at the city lights below, the city he owned. She was not built for this life, he said, his voice hollow. She was soft, like our mother. When our father died and I took over, I tried to shield her. I sent her away, to schools, to Europe. But the darkness, it finds you. She fell in with the wrong people, with drugs. Ilara watched him, this powerful, terrifying man, as a visible crack formed in his armor. She died 15 years ago, he whispered. An overdose. In a hotel room in Milan. I buried her. I buried the story. No one speaks her name. I'm sorry, Ilara said, and she meant it. Marco, Matteo continued, his voice hardening again, was with me when I got the call. He was the only one. He handled the arrangements. He flew her home. He was the only one I trusted with that shame. He turned back to Ilara, his eyes narrowed. This isn't about my ledgers. This isn't about Petrov. This is about her. Marco is using my sister's memory as a weapon. He's not just betraying me. He's desecrating her. What's in the file? Ilara asked. I don't know, Matteo admitted, and the admission seemed to pain him. A police report I never saw. A letter? It doesn't matter. It's leverage. It's filth. And he's going to use it to destroy my reputation before he puts a bullet in my head. A new, terrible understanding dawned on Ilara. And he knows I'm the one who warned you. He doesn't know, Matteo said, but he knows someone did. He knows his plan failed. He's hunting. He is a viper, and he is hunting for the little mouse that warned the farmer. He stepped toward her, and this time, Ilara didn't back away. He was too close, his height and presence overwhelming. He smelled of whiskey, expensive cologne, and rage. You, he said, his voice low, are the only person on earth who knows he failed and knows the name Ophelia. So what do? I'm going to set a trap, Matteo said. Marco wants the person who ruined his plan. I'm going to give him one. Who? Ilara asked, though she already knew the answer. Matteo raised a hand, his touch surprisingly gentle, as he brushed a strand of hair from her face. His thumb grazed her cheekbone. It wasn't a caress. It was an assessment. You, Kara, he whispered. I'm going to use you as bait. The next 24 hours were a blur. The gilded cage was dismantled. Leo packed Ilara a single bag. We're moving, was all he said. They didn't go down the mountain. They went up, to one of Matteo's personal penthouses, a glass box in the sky that screamed, "Look at me." The move was tactical. The safe house was for hiding. The penthouse was for being seen. Marco's network is still active, Matteo explained, joining her in the penthouse. He was all business now, the brief flicker of vulnerability gone. He will have eyes. He will know I've moved a woman into my private apartment under heavy guard. He will assume you are my mistress, and he will assume you are the one who overheard him. And then he'll come for me, Elara said, her voice flat. Yes. And you'll be waiting for him. Yes. And what if your men aren't fast enough? She asked, her hands clenched. What if he gets to me first? Matteo walked to a biometric safe, hidden behind a painting. It hissed open. He removed a small, sleek, black pistol. He placed it on the marble coffee table between them. Then you aren't fast enough, he replied. Elara stared at the gun. She had never seen a real one outside of a police officer's holster. I don't know how to use that. I will teach you. For an hour, Matteo Valenti, the most feared man in the city, taught her how to hold, aim, and fire a weapon. He stood behind her, his body pressed against hers, his arms guiding her stance. You don't aim with your eyes. You aim with your center, he murmured, his breath warm on her ear. Feel the weight. Respect it. Squeeze, don't pull. The contact was intimate, terrifying, and deeply confusing. He was her captor, her protector, and her executioner, all in one. The line between them was blurring, a dark, chemical magnetism pulling them together. He was the first person who had ever made her feel safe and threatened at the exact same time. He won't come himself, Matteo said, satisfied with her handling of the weapon. Not at first. He'll send his Russian friends, Petrov's men. You look for one man in particular. His name is Gregor. He'll have a tattoo on his neck, a Zolotov family crest. It's a two-headed eagle. He's Petrov's finest. If you see him, you don't hesitate. You shoot. I'm not a killer, Matteo. You will be if he finds you, Matteo said simply. Now, we wait. They waited for 2 days. Elara lived on a knife edge of adrenaline. She'd jump at every sound. Matteo was a picture of calm. He took meetings in his study. He made calls. He drank espresso. But his eyes were always on the move, always watching. The trap was set. The bait was dangling. On the third night, the burner phone he'd given her, the one she'd used to call her mother, rang. She looked at Matteo. He nodded. Answer it. She picked it up. Hello? It wasn't Marco. It wasn't Gregor. It was a sound she would know anywhere. A weak, frightened sob. Elara, baby, I don't know where I am. Elara's blood turned to ice. Mum, what's wrong? Where are you? Then, the voice on the line changed. The slick, charming, reptilian voice that had haunted her dreams. She's with me, Tesoro, Marco Bianchi said. The Kensington Clinic has a surprising lapse in security for the right price. Elara collapsed onto the sofa, the phone slipping from her fingers. Matteo snatched it up. Marco, he snarled. Ah, Matteo. Good, you're with your new pet. That saves time. Marco's voice crackled. You were smart, I'll give you that, but not smart enough. You were so busy fortifying your castle, you forgot about the little cottage by the woods. Let her go, Marco. She's an innocent. This is between us. She was an innocent, Marco corrected, until she stuck her pretty little nose in our business. And now she's leverage, just like her mother. A pause. You were outplayed, Fratello. You set bait for me, but I set bait for you. What do you want? Matteo's voice was dangerously quiet. A trade. Simple. You get the old woman back. I get the girl. And as a sign of good faith, you bring me the Ophelia file, the real one. You and I both know what it is. I don't have it, Matteo lied. Don't play games with me, Matteo. I tore your office apart. It wasn't there. It must be at your home. Find it. You bring the file and the girl. I give you the mother. Pier 12. Midnight. Where it all started. Come alone. Just you and her. If I see Leo, if I see anyone, Mrs. Hayes pays the price." The line went dead. Matteo stood in the center of the room, his face a mask of thunder. He had been so focused on Marco's greed that he'd forgotten about his cruelty. He had underestimated him. He had been outmaneuvered. Elara was weeping silently, her face buried in her hands. "He has her. He has my mum. Because of me. Because of you." Matteo walked to her. He didn't comfort her. He pulled her to her feet, his grip on her arms like steel. "Get up," he commanded. You can't," she sobbed. "You can't trade me. He'll kill me." "I am not going to trade you," Matteo said, his grey eyes boring into hers. "I am going to get your mother back. And then I am going to personally remove Marco Bianchi from this earth." "But he said, the file—" "He was right about one thing," Matteo said, releasing her. He walked to his personal desk, a single, massive piece of mahogany. He ran his hand under the lip, pressing a hidden switch. A panel in the side of the desk clicked open, revealing a hidden compartment. He reached inside and pulled out a single, aged, leather-bound folder. The name Ophelia was embossed on the front. "He thinks I don't know what it is," Matteo said, his voice laced with a venom Elara had never heard. "He thinks he's the only one who knows the truth." "What is it?" Elara asked, wiping her tears. Matteo looked at the file, then at her. "It's not a report, it's not a diary." He opened it. Inside was a single, yellowed official document. "It's a birth certificate," Matteo said, his voice breaking with a 15-year-old pain. "Ophelia didn't just die. She had a child, a daughter. A child I forced her to give up to protect her. A child I lost." Elara stared at the document. She saw the mother's name, Ophelia Valenti. She saw the date. She saw the space for the father's name, blank. And then she saw the name given to the child, Elara. The world tilted. The room spun. She looked from the certificate to Matteo's face, his agonizing, familiar grey eyes, her mother's eyes. "You," she whispered, her mind unable to connect the pieces. Ophelia was your mother," Matteo said, his world shattering around him. "And Dio mio, I am your uncle." The drive to Pier 12 was a suffocating vacuum of shared shock. Elara stared blankly at the lights of the city smearing past the window. She was a Valenti. The blood of the man beside her, the man who had bought her, caged her, and trained her to kill, was her own. Her entire life, a narrative of poverty and quiet desperation, was a lie. Her mother, Sarah. Was she her mother? "You were adopted," Sarah had always told her. "A gift." She'd given Elara a small silver locket, a simple oval. "It was with you when we found you." Elara's hand instinctively went to her neck. She pulled the locket out from under her shirt. She fumbled with the tiny clasp. It sprang open. Inside, she had always assumed the faded, looping initial was a stranger's E. It wasn't. It was an O, for Ophelia. "Marco knows," Elara said, her voice hollow. "That's why he called me Tesoro at the restaurant. That's why he was looking at me. He knew who I was. He was Ophelia's friend," Matteo said, his hand strangling the steering wheel. "He was always hovering. I thought he was a pest. But Ophelia, she loved him. I forbade it. I told him if he ever touched her, I'd kill him. When she got pregnant, I assumed it was some junkie. I forced her to give the baby up. I thought I was saving her. Saving you. From this. From him." "And him?" Elara asked. "Marco? What did he think?" "He must have thought I took his child. That I that I killed Ophelia to cover it up." Matteo's voice was ragged. "He's been planning this for 15 years. This isn't a coup. It's vendetta." "He said you wouldn't see the sunrise," Ilara whispered. "He's going to kill you, and he wants me to watch." "He's not the only one with a plan," Matteo said, his voice regaining its steel. The car slowed, pulling into the desolate, rain-slicked container yard of Pier 12. The air was thick with fog and the smell of salt and diesel. In the distance, under a single flickering floodlight, was a black van. Marco stood beside it, his silhouette sharp against the light, and next to him, bound to a steel chair, was Sarah Hayes, her mouth taped, her eyes wide with terror. "He's not alone," Matteo said, spotting at least 4 other figures melting into the shadows of the containers. "Petrov's men." "He said to come alone," Ilara said, her panic rising. "I did," Matteo said. "I am." He turned to her. "You are not my girl. You are not my bait. You are familiar. You stay in this car. Lock the doors. Leo and his team are in the water and on the rooftops. But I have to do this first part. I have to show him the file." "No," Ilara said. The word surprised them both. The terrified waitress was gone, replaced by a Valenti. "He took my mother. He used my real mother's name. I'm not waiting in the car." Before Matteo could argue, she was out, the gun he had given her a heavy, cold weight in her jacket pocket. "Ilara!" Matteo hissed, grabbing his own weapon and the Ophelia file. "Let's go, Uncle." The word hung in the air, a terrible, beautiful, bloody thing. They walked into the light. Marco applauded, a slow, mocking clap. "Bravo, Matteo! You brought the prodigal daughter. How familial." "Let Sarah go, Marco," Matteo commanded, his voice echoing off the steel containers. Ah, Marco tut-tutted, pulling a pistol and pressing it to Sarah's temple. Sarah whimpered. "The file first, and the girl. Let's make the trade." "The girl stays with me," Matteo said. "Wrong answer." Marco cocked the hammer. "No," Ilara screamed. "Stop, here, the file!" She lunged for it, but Matteo held it fast. "Give it to him, Matteo!" Ilara pleaded. "It's my mother!" Matteo looked at Ilara, then at Sarah, then at Marco. His face was a mask of agony. He was trapped. "He loved her, you know," Marco said, his voice conversational, directed at Ilara. "He loved his sister Ophelia so much that when she fell in love with me, when she wanted to leave this filthy life and have our child, he had her murdered. He staged it as an overdose and stole my daughter, stole you." "Liar," Matteo roared. "She was an addict. I tried to save her." "You tried to control her," Marco shrieked, his charm gone, revealing the raw, wounded man beneath. "You couldn't stand her being happy with someone else, so you took everything. You took her life. You took my child. And you left me with nothing but your scraps for 15 years. Tonight I take it back. I take your city, and I take your niece." "She was sick," Matteo yelled. "The drugs. I sent her to Milan to get clean. She died there." "She was clean," Marco countered. "She was clean for me. She was waiting for me in Milan. We were going to meet, and your cleaner put a needle in her arm on your orders. I have the Ophelia file, Matteo, the real one, the coroner's report I paid for, the one that says homicide by injection, the one I've kept all this time." Matteo froze. He looked at the file in his hand, the birth certificate, then at Marco. "No, it's not possible. Give me the girl, Matteo, or the old woman dies, and then I give my file to the feds. Your whole empire crumbles." It was the perfect trap. "Ilara," Matteo said, his voice quiet. "Close your eyes." "What?" "I'm sorry." Matteo dropped the file. "It wasn't a trade. It was a signal. The night exploded. A gunshot cracked, but it wasn't from Marco. It was from a rooftop. The man to Marco's left, Gregor, the one with the Zolotov eagle tattoo, crumpled, a red dot on his forehead. Leo. Marco, in a panic, fired at Matteo. Matteo dived, rolling behind a concrete barrier, returning fire. Petrov's men opened up with automatic weapons, the air filling with the deafening thwack, thwack, thwack of bullets. Ilara was frozen. Chaos erupted. Men were shouting in Russian and Italian. Sarah was screaming behind the tape. Marco grabbed Sarah, using her chair as a human shield, dragging her back toward the van. Kill them! Kill them both! One of the Russians saw Ilara, alone and exposed. He raised his rifle. Ilara didn't think. She didn't aim. She just squeezed. The recoil slammed her arm back, but the shot was true. The Russian grabbed his chest and fell. She had done it. She had killed a man. She felt nothing. Just cold. Matteo was pinned down. Marco was almost at the van. He shoved Sarah to the ground and aimed his gun, not at Matteo, but at Ilara. "You," he snarled, "Ophelia's ghost, you should have died with her." He fired. "No!" Matteo roared, rising from cover to draw the shot, but someone else was faster. Leo, appearing from the shadows, tackled Marco from the side. The two men went down, wrestling for the gun. It was over in seconds. Matteo's men, shadows in black tactical gear, had neutralized the Russians. The pier was suddenly silent, save for the three figures on the ground. Leo, Matteo, and Marco. Ilara ran to her mother, cutting the tape and the ropes with a shaking knife. "Mum! Mum, are you okay?" Sarah just sobbed, clinging to her. Matteo walked over to where Leo stood, over a wounded, gasping Marco. Marco was clutching his stomach, shot in the struggle. "Was it true?" Matteo demanded, his voice trembling. Did I kill her?" Marco just gurgled, a bloody laugh escaping his lips. You'll never know, fratello." Matteo raised his gun, his hand shaking to finish him. "Don't," Ilara said. Matteo turned. Ilara was standing, her face streaked with tears and gunpowder, her own gun hanging by her side. "Don't," she repeated, stronger. "He used my mother. He used both my mothers. Killing him is too easy. Let him rot in a cell. Let him live with what he did." Matteo looked at his niece. He saw Ophelia's eyes, but they were filled with his father's steel. He saw a Valente. He lowered the gun. "As you wish, nipote." He nodded to Leo. "Clean this up. Get Mrs. Hayes to the car. She'll be taken somewhere safe, somewhere no one will ever find." He turned back to Ilara as sirens wailed in the far distance, a signal that Leo's men had made the anonymous tip. "And you?" Ilara asked. Matteo looked at the body of the Russian she had shot, then back at her. The terrified waitress was dead, and a new woman was born on that pier. "You," he said, "are coming home." The Valenti estate was not the safe house, nor the penthouse. It was a sprawling, shadowed fortress of old stone and older money, perched on the highest point of the city, looking down on everything. It was the heart of the empire. Ilara stood in the library, a 2-story room panelled in dark, ancient wood, a cold fireplace yawning before her. She had showered. The smell of gunpowder was gone, but she could still feel the phantom kick of the gun in her hand. Sarah was safe, on a plane to a private facility in Switzerland, her memory of the night's events already clouded by the sedatives Leo had administered. She would be cared for, like a precious doll, for the rest of her life. Ilara was alone with her uncle. Matteo entered the room, a fresh suit, a dark tie. He looked once more like the king, but his eyes were ancient. He held a brandy snifter in one hand. In the other he held the file Marco had dropped, the coroner's report. He wasn't lying, Matteo said, his voice dead. Homicide. My man in Milan. He misunderstood my orders. I said, protect her. I said, keep her safe, no matter the cost. He thought I meant from herself. He had ordered his sister's death without ever saying the words. So I am who I am. Because of you, Ilara said. It wasn't an accusation, it was a statement. My whole life, the poverty, the struggle, it was all your collateral damage. Yes, Matteo said, his voice cracking. I can't fix that. I can't give you back your mother. I can't give you back your life. No, Ilara said, turning to face him. You can't. He set the report on the desk. Marco is in federal custody. He'll talk, but he'll only talk about Petrov. He won't talk about Ophelia. He won't talk about us. The Viper knows when he is beaten. He'll take the deal. And us? Ilara asked. What are we? Am I your prisoner again? You are my blood, Matteo said. He walked to her, standing so close she could feel the heat radiating from him. The twisted, magnetic pull from the penthouse was still there. But it was different now. It wasn't just desire or possession. It was recognition. This, he said, gesturing to the room, the house, the city beyond the windows, was supposed to be mine. But I have no heir. I have no one. He looked at her, his grey eyes searching hers. I took everything from you, Ilara. Your mother. Your past. Your name. I'm going to give it all back. He took her hand. It was the hand that had served him wine. It was the hand that had held a gun. He kissed the knuckles. The mansion keys you received. They were for a cage, a temporary measure. He walked to the massive desk and opened a drawer. He removed a single, ornate, ancient iron key. It was a skeleton key, heavy and cold. He pressed it into her palm. These, he said, are for the kingdom. Ilara looked at the key. It was a burden. It was a crown. It was a chain. Marco was right about one thing, Matteo murmured, his hand lingering on hers. You have Valenti blood. This darkness, this power. It's in your veins. The mansion is yours. Everything is yours. He stepped back, his eyes dark, possessive, and for the first time, admiring. But you, he whispered, are mine. Ilara closed her hand around the key, the metal biting into her skin. She looked at her reflection in the dark library window. She saw her face. She saw her aunt's eyes. She saw the new queen of the Valenti Empire, forged in betrayal and blood. She turned to face her uncle, her savior, her jailer, and her subject. A slow, cold smile touched her lips. No, uncle, Ilara Hayes Valenti said, her voice clear and steady as steel. You are mine. What a story. Ilara's journey from serving tables to ruling an empire is one of the darkest, most twisted tales of fate we've ever told. She thought she was getting a reward, but she got a cage. She thought she was warning a boss, but she was meeting her family. Now the waitress is gone, and the queen is here to reign. But what do you think? Is Matteo a monster or a savior? And what kind of ruler will Ilara become? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved that dose of dark romance and mafia drama, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to share this video with a friend who loves a good twist. Most importantly, if you want more stories like this, more drama, more romance, and more worlds to get lost in, make sure you subscribe to the channel and ring that bell. You won't want to miss what we have coming next. Thanks for listening. See you next time. Love you.